Welcome to the living room where we listen, learn, and live together. I'm your host, Richard Martin. Make yourself right at home. I'm glad you're here. Our special guest today is a pastor, public speaker, pod-junkie, and recording artist. As a faith leader, he has served congregations in California, Florida, and New Jersey. He is a public speaker for Respect and Rebellion, a movement fostering conversations across political lines for universities and nonprofits. As a member of the Acappella group Committed, he mastered the art of performing under pressure before millions and emerged as the season 2 champion of NBC's The Sing Off. I remember that. To date, this group has received nominations for the Dove Stellar NAACP Image Award and even a Grammy Award nomination. Aside from being a recording artist, Geston also is a podcast host, a producer who has leveraged podcasting as a connection tool for ministry. As a voice actor, he voices the vision of others and helps bring them to life. Geston Pierre ultimately aspires to inspire 1 billion people with his voice before he expires. I'm glad to welcome to my brother. We go back for years. Fellow Tampa Bay Buccaneer fans.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Geston Pierre. What's going on, brother?
Man, I'm glad to be here with you, bro. And go Bucks. And all the Florida heads, all the Florida boys are just celebrating right now because our change has finally come. But I'm glad to be here on the Living Room podcast.
Likewise, our change has finally come. It's been a long road since our first and most previous Super Bowl win. And when we received news that we were getting some all-star players added to our roster, I think all of us were saying, okay, I think we're going to be a little bit better than years past. But I'm not sure how many people were all in from day one to say we're definitely going to the Super Bowl, much less win. And it was definitely a historic occasion. First team to host the Super Bowl in their city, play in it in their stadium, and win. I was one of those guys who did not just want to stop there. Okay, it's history. We've made it in, but we lost. No. This needs to be a win all the way around. So go Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Yes, we are time stamping this podcast. This happens not long after the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have won the Super Bowl for the 2020-2021 season. And each one of Tampa's major sports teams made it to the premier platform of their sport. The Tampa Bay Lightning made it to the Stanley Cup and won. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers made it to the Super Bowl and won. I'm proud of the Tampa Bay Devil Rays for making it to the World Series. They did not win the series, but you know, that's an anomaly. It's not every year that a team's major sports make it to their premier championship stage. And so shout out to Tampa Bay, all the Florida family.
Yep.
It was an amazing experience indeed. So, brother, listen, I'm glad to have you with us here in the living room. We met at Oakwood University when you arrived. In fact, when both of us arrived, it was Oakwood College.
Right.
When I was there going into the second semester of my freshman year, I remember the first semester of freshman year, they were inviting the students to provide their input. What do you think it should be called? Should it be called Oakwood University, Oakwood Adventist University? Should it remain Oakwood College? And, you know, the rest is history. It is now Oakwood University. And we had the chance to sing in the Aeolians together.
Yes, sir.
Pleasant memories there for a lifetime. So I want to ask you, just kind of starting there, when did you first recognize that you had a musical talent and gift? And I guess connected with that is, man, when did your voice change? As we can hear right now, you're working with way more bass and baritone than I am. So when did that happen for you?
Yeah, man. So I'll circle back on when we first met. So I first met you at Music Fest. So we were both in high school, and then you had an afro.
Yes,
but I didn't know you as Richard Martin, but I do remember meeting you with the Calvary team, the choir there.
Yeah.
So that's when I first met you, but we officially, reacquainted at Oakwood.
Sure.
So I sang in high school in the choir, and my junior year, we got a new choir director, and the director had us do auditions. And I always knew I could sing, even though I didn't really publicize it. I sang in the shower, did my runs, did my cool stuff, and I knew I had a range. But when I auditioned, my music teacher noticed my voice when I got to those lower registers. She said, you know what? I'm switching you from tenor to bass.
Wow.
And I was mad. I was like, no, I'm a tenor. I'm a tenor. I've been singing tenor. And I was like, oh, I don't want to sing bass. And no, she's like, no, I need you. I need your voice in the bass section. This is senior year of high school. And after joining the choir and singing bass, I realized that as I sang that part, my vocals got stronger. I got better at it. And around that same time, I was asked to sing bass to join an acapella group named Committed. This is high
Yeah.
school, to sing the bass part. And so I joined the group and I ended up going to Oakwood, and I got to Oakwood and I sang in the Aeolians. And of course I sang the bass part, and my voice continued to develop as I
Mm.
continued to do it. But, when I look back on that experience, I did not want to sing bass in the choir.
Mm.
I wanted to keep singing tenor where I was comfortable and familiar. But had I not made that switch to the bass section, I would have never developed the other depths of my voice. And so it's just a powerful memory that I have of my vocal abilities. I've always been able to sing, but that pivotal moment in high school when my teacher made me sing bass, that's when I really began to cultivate this gift. And I still have my tenor range and I
Right.
still have my bass range because at Oakwood, I sang in DP and I sang in the Aeolians.
Right.
And so I was able to do both and to improve my range and vocal abilities.
Yeah, and if you sing in dynamic praise, you definitely need to have a higher register to be able to go to. You're going to need to reach those. And definitely in the Aeolians, I remember singing in particular "Oh for Faith." And you would often open up that song, and which is a beautiful, beautifully arranged song, but definitely has the lead baritone bass soloist down in the bottoms.
Yeah.
And so to be able to hit those low notes, and when people hear it, I think whatever section of the choir you sing in, when people hear it, they think, oh, that comes naturally. But your story behind the sound is compelling because it speaks to the fact that sometimes there are those who recognize something in us that we don't recognize in ourselves, and we can
Right.
put up resistance initially.
Mm-hmm.
And in high school, you didn't see all of what would come subsequent to that switch.
No.
But I'm thankful for that music teacher who was bold enough, courageous enough, and used some of their experience to lean in towards you and say, listen, at a certain point, this ceases to be a dialogue, and I'm telling you what's going to happen. And
Right.
it benefited you in the long run.
Yeah.
Is that the only time that that has happened for you in life where something was kind of placed in front of you to move you in a certain direction? You didn't really see it making sense initially, but afterwards it's come to make more sense?
Yeah, fast forward to graduating from Oakwood with my theology degree, and I was getting ready to go to grad school. I didn't have a call,
Mhm.
but I decided I would further my education. So after a semester of school, Committed was presented with this opportunity to go on this show called The Sing Off.
Yeah.
And we were at different places in the country. And for me to take the opportunity, I would have to withdraw from seminary and move to LA for 5 or 6 months and compete, not knowing what would happen.
Mhm.
And so after talking to the group, we prayed about it and certain things lined up and we decided to go. And so people were like, dude, what are you doing? You're leaving. Once you graduate from seminary, you'll probably get a job,
Right.
but there's no guarantee what's going to happen when you move to LA and compete on this reality TV show. And so I decided to take the leap. I left the furniture at the apartment in Park Hill. I think it was Park Hill, Rose Hill Road, that apartment back there, the
Yep.
brown building.
Yep.
And I literally moved to LA, left my car with a friend. Just use it, drive it. I don't care. Don't let it sit in the cold. And I moved to LA, and little did I know, we ended up winning the competition.
Wow.
And from that time, we were traveling full time, like living out of suitcases for 3 months, 3 weeks out of the month.
Sure.
And eventually, like 3 years later, I did go back to seminary to finish what I started. But had I not taken that leap to go on that show, I wouldn't have had those opportunities. And when I left the seminary, I told God, God, I'm not going back to the seminary unless I'm sponsored by a conference. I
Wow.
said that to God. Don't tell God your plans. God, I'm not going back to the seminary unless I'm sponsored by a conference. And God told me, look what you're doing right now.
Mm.
You are sponsored.
Wow.
Go finish what you started.
Wow.
And so I, as a self-sponsored seminary dropout, re-enrolled to seminary while still traveling. I was missing class sometimes. I would see my good friend Laurent the gospel globetrotter at the airport all the time because he was traveling preaching, I was traveling singing, but
Yeah.
we were students, flying in first class, flying
Mhm.
in sky priority, in front of our teachers in the economy cabin. So it was an interesting situation. But I praise God that I was able to complete my studies in
Sure.
2013, and I received my first call from the Florida conference, and I began my ministry there.
I remember when that opportunity presented itself, and whenever you're called to take such a leap, there's always going to be a gallery that presents competing opinions. One portion of that gallery says, this is an opportunity of a lifetime. Don't waste it. Don't miss it. This open window or open door might not come again. Then there are those who encourage you to play it safe. Hey,
Right,
listen, you don't know if you leave now, will you ever make it back to the seminary? Is this an extension of your call?
right,
Was that yesteryear and now this is now? And I can imagine that presented to you feelings of that tension. Who knows that some of those voices might have been not just well wishers or persons with good intentions, but your own family members might
right,
have been saying, Justin, listen, we hear you, but hear us. And then
right.
there might have been those who were saying, hey, listen, why are we even thinking about this? You need to be on the next flight out to California. What was it that brought you to that final moment for you to say, I'm going to take this leap? You're hearing all of these voices, all of the different opinions and positions, persons who might have positioned themselves in your ear as if they were the voice of God, right? How did you
Yeah.
finally come to a personal sense of conviction to be able to make that decision?
Yeah. Well, it started with prayer. I prayed about it. We prayed about it as a group. And after praying and after thinking about my story and reminiscing on those experiences, like the one I mentioned in high school, you know, transferring from the tenor section to the bass section in the choir, how I
Mm,
joined the group Committed in high school, and how I ended up at Oakwood, and thinking about our journey and the commitment that we made in high school
yeah,
to keep it going no matter what, and how Cedric Dent from Take Six made the recommendation for us to go on that show to the producer.
yeah,
And so thinking about those things, man, I just felt compelled that this was an opportunity that was a God moment,
sure.
and I didn't want to miss out on it regardless of what would happen. As risky as it was, how can you leave the sacred seminary to go to a secular TV reality competition? But
Sure.
when we got there, man, we were praying with groups, we were doing Bible studies with them, we were hanging out with them, and we were able to be a witness and to continue to be a light
Yeah.
where we were. And so it was a phenomenal opportunity to take that leap, and I wouldn't trade it for the world, man. It
Right.
was nerve wracking. Prior to that, I had never done choreography aside from snapping my fingers. I had never done anything more. So singing while doing choreography, dealing with the hot lights and the audiences of that production studio, it was nerve wracking, and I
Right.
was scared and nervous sometimes. But sometimes God has to take you out of your comfort zone to
Yeah.
get you to that next level. And people are like, "Yo, yeah, that was cool. You won the show." But literally, it was 10 years of preparation before we got to that experience on the Sing
Right.
Off. And there's a quote that says, it takes 10 years to become an overnight success. And it's true.
Wow.
It doesn't happen overnight. You may get the exposure overnight, but the preparation does not happen overnight. It may take a decade honing your craft, working on your skills. But that's our story.
Oh, preacher. And I know that's coming from more than just a theological background. That's your life experience.
Right,
That the exposure put us on a national stage seemingly overnight or over a season, as it
right,
were.
right.
But there was a private, behind the scenes season of preparation that many people weren't there for.
Oh, yeah,
They
in the
did
dorm.
not see or witness the countless opportunities that you and Committed had to sing, but they weren't always on stages with hot lights
Oh, no.
and massive audiences. Sometimes they were,
Ooh,
share with us about that preparation season.
yeah.
And were there times where you felt like, hey, listen, this has come to the end of the road. It's been real, fellas, but I'm out. How did you stay in it for those years? Because I think sometimes the preparation can be so kind of like an uphill journey that we're hungering for that moment, our big break, as we often call it.
Right.
And it doesn't often seem like it's going to come. So what was it that kept you in the group, kept you in the race, as it were, leading up to the sing off?
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back to the reason why the group started, for the love of the game.
Okay.
We didn't want to start an acapella group because it was cool. We didn't start an acapella group to get attention from girls. We started the acapella group because we loved the art of acapella
Sure.
and we wanted to engage in it. And so, we were in the dorm before we ever had a gig. We were rehearsing in the dorm until like 12, 1 a.m., like before we ever had gigs.
Yeah.
And so, eventually churches would reach out to us and we'd have these opportunities. But sometimes when we showed up, all six of us would be crowded around one mic singing.
Wow.
We didn't always have a writer. We didn't always have the best microphones to work with. Sometimes we didn't have microphones to sing with, and we had to
Sure.
project. But in those moments, man, we just kept pushing forward, and we remembered why we started.
Right.
And so when the going gets tough, you got to remember your why,
Yeah.
because that will help you keep going, because it will get tough. It
Mhm.
won't always be easy. And, you have to be able to be flexible and to be willing to be grateful for every opportunity, big or small.
Sure.
But if you keep being consistent, eventually you will be exposed. And when
Yes.
you're exposed, you want to be ready. And so that's why preparation matters.
When you're exposed, you want to be ready. Speaking of exposure now, the nation had the chance to hear your voices, to get a sense of your personalities, to become familiar with you. And now this is the big announcement episode where the winner is announced. Describe what you're feeling, what you're thinking when it's down to you and one other group. And when they finally call your name, walk us through that moment.
Man, first of all, that was the longest pause in history. Uh, I didn't know that 30 seconds could feel like 30 minutes,
Right.
but that music was playing and we were waiting, just holding on to each other, saying, "This is it, fellas." And there were over 9 million viewers. And, people had voted, they called in. Some of y'all voted more than once, but that's okay. We'll take it. But, the people voted and we emerged as the champions. And when that confetti fell and Nick Lachey said, "Committed," and the confetti fell and the music, and man, I was crying. I was jumping. I was crying. We were hugging each other. And it was the beginning of our professional career.
Right.
Because up until that point, we were considered amateurs. However, we were the same group. I
Yeah.
said the only thing that was different was that now we are exposed, but we
Mm.
were the same group with the same skills. But praise God, we were ready for that wild journey and adventure, dealing with recording contracts, dealing with
Sure.
traveling, presenting with all kinds of opportunities, meeting celebrities left and right. It was
Mhm.
crazy. It was a whirlwind, but it was a phenomenal journey. And we would always get people reaching out to us in our Facebook account, telling us how we were encouraging them. We inspired them to go back to church. We were just a source of light and
Sure.
inspiration to them. And so it was a phenomenal, phenomenal experience. And the fact of the matter is, whether the confetti fell or not, I would have left that experience a champion regardless.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a profound perspective to adopt because often we feel as though the wins and the winning experience only ends with what others would consider just that, the win. Did you come in first place? Did you
Right.
reach the championship stage? Um, the Buffalo Bills lost to the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC Championship game. And there was a powerful image that emerged, I want to say either later that Sunday evening or the next day. And it was of one of the Buffalo Bills star wide receivers, Stephon Diggs. He was the only Buffalo Bill to remain on the field to watch the Kansas City Chiefs celebrate their win.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I say he was the only one, I'm not trying to imply that in years past, most times the defeated team or the opposing team would remain on the field. No, the tradition is the exact opposite. Most of the team, all of the team leaves and
Right.
lets the winning team celebrate. But Stephon Diggs, of his own accord, chose to stay out there and watch. And a lot of people were like, why is he out here? And subsequent to that, it became clear that he was there because he felt the agony of defeat and
Mm-hmm.
he was watching the thrill of victory. But for him, he said, I'm going to learn from this.
Yeah.
This will be my opportunity one day.
Right.
And there's an image of him just standing there watching the confetti fall, and it's for
Mm-hmm.
another team.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And yet he was going to draw winning lessons from that moment. And so you're right. sometimes the confetti doesn't fall on us because we
Hmm.
won, but it can be a winning experience. So
Definitely.
from the time you chose to leave seminary until that moment, about how much time elapses from leaving until you all are announced the winners of the sing off?
Yeah. I left seminary in August of 2010,
Hmm.
and we were proclaimed the winners in December of 2010.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. The reason why I wanted to, bring that out is because at times a person cannot want to take the leap because they don't know how long or short of a period of time will elapse until you get some kind of, oh, this is why I needed to leap.
Right.
And mind you, now that's just when you were announced as the winners.
Exactly.
Your reasons for the leap, I'm sure, were presenting themselves before that moment. Like you
Right.
said, we were having the opportunity to be light, to be salt, to just be ministers by way of our presence and what we brought to the whole experience, not just to fellow singers and fellow groups, but also to the production persons,
Right.
to the hotel staff, to the
Right.
persons that we were encountering as we went out to eat. And so I love that sometimes when we are called to take those leaps in life, to transition from what might be a more traditional and comfortable lane to something that has a little bit more adventure to it and question
Right.
marks, that there will always be corresponding reasons that aren't limited to that winning moment. But the
Hmm.
journey itself presents opportunities that say, okay, here's why I needed to be in this lane for a while.
Yeah. There's a quote that I love that says, "Life life is lived in forward, but it is only understood in reverse."
Say that one more time for us.
Yeah. 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 Life is lived in forward, but it's only understood in reverse.
Mm. Yeah, that's real. That's real. So speaking of going forward, we're kind of going to go back to go forward. You made a choice to transition from seminary, and just by way of explanation, brief explanation for those who are not aware of what is seminary. Seminary is a graduate school level of training for pastors.
Right.
It is to some degree equivalent to medical school for a physician. It is after your undergraduate degree, whatever it is in, whether it was in theology or something else, you go to seminary for extended graduate training. So, in our particular faith community, one of the premier seminaries, in fact, the flagship seminary, is in a little small town called Berrien Springs, Michigan. Southwest Michigan, we often call it Barren Springs,
Boring springs.
Boring Springs.
Yep.
I mean, goodness me, it was literally two streetlight intersections. And for the longest time, there was one. When I arrived, there were two. Um, Probably some of the most challenging winters you will ever experience in your life. And you're talking about two Florida boys who
Yeah.
go up to Southwest Michigan and have to endure the brunt of sunless winters and gray skies and blistering winds. I mean, just thinking about it, there were some days where I was looking out of the windows in classes saying, what am I doing here?
Right.
And how long do I stay here? So that's kind of what we mean when we keep referencing seminary. So you transition out. So speaking of the sense of your why, when did you sense a call to faith leadership, to pastoral ministry? When did that happen in your walk?
Yeah. I felt that call when I was in high school, about 15 years old. And I felt the call to do that. And of course, I didn't tell anybody, and I wouldn't
Mhm,
tell you if you asked me.
mhm.
I wanted to stay cool. So, I had my little Jonah years. And even when I got to Oakwood, I professed to be a business major. And it wasn't until after the first semester of my freshman year that I finally surrendered to that call, and I felt that sense of peace. But even when I accepted that call and I was on campus, I didn't really publicize it. I didn't really tell people. I was just being myself. And I remember one time in the library at Oakwood, and I had a conversation with you,
Mhm.
and you were like, "Are you a music minor? What's your major?" And I was like, "I'm a theology major." And he was like, and you were like, "Really? Oh,
Yeah,
okay." And
yeah,
so people assumed that I was a music major, or they assumed I was an education major because I worked at the Oakwood Child Development Lab for 4 years,
right.
the daycare there on campus. And so I was always engaged in a variety of experiences.
Mhm.
And so I wasn't just engaged at the Mosley complex, I was engaged at the music building, at the um, daycare on campus. I
Right.
was doing other extracurricular activities. And so people didn't know that that was my major, but it was, and I was preparing for the adventure that God had for me.
So you mentioned adventure. I'm sure it's been just that, and we've already talked about a portion of that adventure. But eventually, you come back to seminary after a time with more focused attention, investing in that part of your call to ministry, which is
Right.
your musical gift. You come back to seminary, you finish, and then you receive a call to Florida.
Yeah.
What was that like? Was it an easy transition from Berrien Springs to Florida? How did that unfold for you? And then we'll get to where you went after that, and then where you are now.
Yeah. Most seminarians graduate thinking that they're going to change the world, and man, they're just going to strike fire and do amazing things.
Yep.
And you know, the prayer is that you do that. But man, my first assignment was at a conservative, Caucasian, Confederate flag loving congregation in the country part of Florida, Avon Park.
Wow.
And it was a wild experience, man. They were not ready to receive me, but that was where the conference placed me. And as soon as I got there, I tried to say, "Hey, this is not good. This is not good. You know, this is not a good situation." I tried to love them and serve them, but eventually, after in a sermon, I mentioned Philando Castile and police brutality, and I mentioned that in my sermon, and I hit that point. I got a notice in the bulletin. They didn't tell me, but they wrote it in the bulletin that next Sabbath will be Pastor Pierre's last Sabbath here. So,
Wait. You
yeah,
mean to tell me that without an actual audible conversation with you,
yeah,
there's a message in a printed bulletin
yep, that my
saying
time
next
is done.
Sabbath?
Yep,
I've
yeah,
never heard this story before. This is my first time hearing about, and not that you have to just wear this story, but this actually happened.
it really happened, bro. And for those who don't know how it works, man, conferences place pastors at churches. And so churches don't hire or fire. The
Right.
conferences do that. So the church didn't talk to the conference. I called the conference. When I told my ministerial director, he was shocked. He was like, "What? What is happening?" And so they, I guess there was a meeting that I didn't know about, but it was published in the bulletin. When I saw it, man, I was hurt.
Yeah.
Man, I felt rejected. I was just like, Lord, like, why would you put me through 7 years of theological training to deal with this crap? You
Hmm.
know? And I was just like, man, this I'm done.
Yeah.
So the conference was like, we can reassign you somewhere else. I was like, you know what? Forget it. I wrote my resignation letter, peaced out, right? So I resigned from, pastoral ministry,
Right.
and I was engaging in opportunity in California. And so I literally packed up my car, drove from Florida to the Bay Area, and started a new chapter there.
Wow.
And it's crazy because I took an opportunity in the Bay Area that cost twice as much as Florida for half as much as I was getting paid in Florida.
Mm.
So, it was just an opportunity, but I wanted to try something new, and I
Right.
felt like God was leading me there. And so the church was paying me. I didn't have benefits, but the Lord provided.
Sure.
And I had a wonderful season of healing there. I was engaged in the community. I joined this movement I met this guy in San Francisco who works with Respect and Rebellion. And he was like, "Man, you're an awesome public speaker, a presenter. Would you be interested in being a part of this organization? And do you know someone who you could participate with?" And I said, "You know what? I have a childhood friend that I disagree with politically, but we're still friends."
Yeah.
And I pitched it to my friend in Florida, politician, attorney, and he was like, I'll do it. And so we had our first gig while I was in the Bay Area at UC Berkeley,
Hmm.
and they paid my friend and I both $1,000 each just to present for 1 hour about our political differences.
Wow.
And that was the beginning of our adventure with Respect and Rebellion. To date, we've been at BYU. We're going to be in Florida virtually, and we look forward to speaking at many other schools. But man, had I not moved to the Bay Area, I would not have been plugged with the gentleman who put me on to this movement.
Sure.
And so, even though some people were like, "Yo, what are you doing, bro? How are you going to move to California, that expensive place, and get less money? What are you doing?" I was like, "This is where I'm being led." And I didn't have a problem with taking a leap of faith and to go, not knowing what would be the end of it. And I knew it would be for a season, but, That's a relationship that's a relationship with God that I had. I was willing to go wherever he led me.
Yeah.
And I have seen that paid off in dividends. Like whenever God says to do something, I do it because I know that there is no failure in Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And so I rely on him. But sometimes I do some crazy things that don't make sense on paper, things that don't make sense for the trajectory of my career.
Right.
But I've accepted that God has me on a different track. And so I was there in California, serving at a church in downtown Oakland,
Mm-hmm.
being a public speaker. And eventually the pastor who was there left. And the church was like, okay, we're going to appoint you as the interim pastor. And so I was now, leading as the lead pastor. For a whole year, I did that until my time was up and I transitioned back to the East Coast and I was hired by the Allegheny East Conference. So I've been in ministry for about 9 years, right? Approximately. However, on paper, I'm not ordained, I don't have much to show for because I've been an associate pastor twice. I've been an interim pastor twice. But, when people look at me, they're like, dude, what have you done with your career? Like, how are you not ordained yet? And I'm just like, hey, it's my story, it's my journey, and I embrace it. And I don't feel less than because of it, because I realize that God has me on a specific journey and I'm okay with where I am.
Sure. In Acts, a lot of the attention is given to persons like Peter and Paul and John. But one of the disciples, in fact, one of the deacons that I love is Philip. And he doesn't have a lot of real estate in the book of Acts. But there are a few scenes that give us this understanding that where God told him to go was pivotal for that moment. One in
Yeah.
particular, Acts 8, was this encounter with the Ethiopian. And the Ethiopian is studying scripture, has no idea what he's reading, can't interpret it or apply it. And God moves Philip there for that time and says, go help this Ethiopian. Goes, helps him, explains the scriptures to him. He's baptized. And then Philip's out into a next place. So there's this here, then there, then here mode of operations for Philip's ministry. And most people might be more attracted to a Peter Paul route, which
Right.
is, hey, listen, not only do you get the chance to speak to thousands and, the call of God on your life is very clear, man, there are also Philips who my call for you is here and there and
Right.
here, wherever you go, and that you have adopted this sense of, hey, I'm going to follow in obedience wherever God goes. My pathway might not look like other ministers' pathways, but
Right.
I'm not them and their path is not mine.
Mm-hmm.
God has ordered steps for me. And as I hear your story, G, all of these things right now, going from Florida to California, now being in New Jersey, all of these things have been preparatory for what you're already experiencing. But do you get a sense at all that you haven't even seen all of the answers to those why questions? Why this experience in Florida? Why that experience in California? Do you get a sense that there's still yet more story to be revealed?
God keeps revealing that story, that answer to me every now and again. And just 2 weeks ago, I was accepted into this prestigious fellowship, this organization called On Deck, a place where the top talent goes to explore what's next. They have people who are VCs, venture capitalists, entrepreneurs, and they just launched a podcasting fellowship. And I interviewed and I got on board. And we are the inaugural cohort for this podcasting fellowship with On Deck, based in Silicon Valley. And I'm just like, man, I mean, I don't feel like I really deserve to be there. I look around in the orientation, I'm just like, oh, snap, that's so and so. And I'm Googling them like, whoa.
Yeah.
And then I remember, GP, God has you on a different track. Everything that you've experienced, all the places that you've lived, there are connections that you've made that have prepared you and have given you opportunities that you are now experiencing and will experience in the future. And so, I truly believe, had I not lived in the Bay Area for 2 years, that perhaps I wouldn't have been a part of this fellowship. But, I praise God for my story and for how he is leading me and for how he will lead me. So I'm just grateful to experience life and to move forward in faith. And whenever a door presents itself, I pray. And if God says go, I go. If he
Mm-hmm.
says no, I peace out.
Yeah.
And so that's how I operate. And I appreciate you saying that, sharing that insight about Philip. And that just spoke to my heart and gave me a deeper level of confirmation for how God has led me and how he will lead me.
California was not only a place of renewed opportunities for you, but it was a place of healing, you mentioned.
Yeah.
Why is it necessary for the persons watching and listening who feel as though they might be in a place of transition and where they are leaving, they're leaving with some wounds on their heart?
Yeah.
Why is healing a necessary season for whatever's next? Because you could have easily been disgruntled. That as I heard it, literally, GP, I can only imagine how traumatic that was.
Yeah.
But that you did not say, you know what, peace to everything, God, this work, I'm out. I don't need this, basically. But you went to California, and I don't even know if this was your immediate intention, but while their healing took place, why is healing necessary before we get back into the fray or move to our next season of purpose?
Yeah. A lot of times we leave situations that are toxic or, just terrible. And we make the mistake of rushing to what's next and trying to go to the next best thing. But it's important to have that renewal, to have that healing, to, seek counseling, find a community that you can count on to just, be authentic, be yourself, keep it real. And I'm not going to lie, when I left Florida, I told myself, listen, I might not ever pastor again, but all I know is, I need to move to this next season and see what God has for me. And, I was engaged working with the church, but, I was open to whatever else God had for me to do. I explored, pursuing an MBA degree. I explored doing other things, but, I had those mentors and those people who were always encouraging and confirming what God was saying and doing with me. And so I believe in counseling. I believe in having confidants and people that you can rely on to have those crucial conversations, because a lot of times people can end up leaving a toxic situation and they don't heal, and they bring those toxicities to wherever they're going. Like they're leading while they're bleeding. So it's important for you to get off the road, wipe off the blood, put some band-aids on, get taken care of before that joint gets infected. You want to take care of your wounds, because you don't want that joint to continue to get filth and dirt and grime, and for that wound to get infected. So it's important for you to just pull over, take a break, whether it's counseling, whether it's through your confidants, whether it's engaging in your passions. But it's okay to just be. Like, you don't have to do. You are not a human doing. You are a human being.
Mm.
And that's a quote from my former seminary professor, Dr. Solacek.
Yeah.
And so I had to just realize, listen, I'm GP. I may not be pastoring right now. I may not have a full-time job, but before I was a pastor, I was a person. And before I was a person, God had a purpose for my life.
Yeah.
And so let me go ask God, what is my purpose and what do you have prepared for me? That was my mentality during that season in California, making less money, but God was opening doors of opportunity to do other unique things in the community.
This is so liberating, because we often feel, especially in a Western sphere, Western context, an American society which prioritizes individualism and in many respects makes purpose and profession synonymous.
Right.
That who you are is based on what you do.
You do. Mm-hmm.
And then there's the consumerism, right? Who you are is supplemented by what you have. Mm-hmm. Titles, material things, status, right? Now it's clear that your journey has acquired attention, affirmation, right? But you helped us to kind of understand better that, yes, I do a number of things and have done a number of things, but those don't define who I am. Nope. I am not what I do. Mm-hmm. I am who I am. And as that core becomes strengthened and healed, then what I do has a better chance to inspire. And that's one of your missions.
Yeah.
I want to read it again for the person who might not have caught it. You said that you aspire to inspire 1 billion people with your voice before you expire.
Yeah.
When did you receive that kind of clarity about your purpose?
Yeah. So that mission became clear to me in November when I joined the audio app called Clubhouse.
Mhm.
And by the way, I have like 8 invitations to give away. If you want to get in through the front door, holla at me. So I was in a room that was talking about personal mission statements and clarity. And from that room, I was motivated to revisit my story and to kind of revamp my goals. And so I realized that I had experienced a lot of things and there were certain themes that were recurring in my life. And so I realized that over the past decade, I've literally transitioned from inspiring thousands to inspiring millions.
Mm.
So when I was on the Sing Off, I was exposed to an audience of 10 million people. Around that same year in 2010, sang at the Thanksgiving Macy's Parade in New York with an audience watching on TV of like 50 million people, right? 5 years ago, our group recorded Lift Every Voice and Sing, the Black National Anthem. And on YouTube to date, that has about 1.5 million views.
Yeah.
And I thought about these stats and I'm just like, you know what? So far, over the past decade, I've probably reached about 60 to 65 million people. However, I might not reach the whole world. There are 7.5 billion people in the world. But the fact that I've reached 65 million people, maybe perhaps I can reach a billion. And you
Mm.
know what? Here it is, Richard. There are 1,000 millions in a billion. So I told you I've reached 65 million people,
Yeah.
but there are 1,000 millions in a billion. So I might not reach everybody, but I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life to reaching 1 billion people with my voice before I expire.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the ways you do that is through podcasting. In fact, you were very instrumental, and I've mentioned this in previous episodes, that you and several others were instrumental by way of just your own marketing of podcasting, not just your own personal podcast, but tips in helping me garner the courage to actually launch out into this. So what we are doing right now is in large part due to your inspiration. So thank you, my brother. I do appreciate it. And I've enjoyed it. I think that that's another thing that happens when you choose to inspire people from a place of clarity about mission, is that you never know when that inspiration lands, what it'll be the catalyst for. And for me, I kind of had this sense of, there are already countless podcasts out there. Is there any more room left for another voice, another platform, another title, another objective? And in watching you and listening to you, you said, hey, listen, sure, 10 years ago might have been the premier time to start a podcast.
Yeah.
But again, we live forward, we understand in reverse.
Yeah.
Now that you have that understanding, what are you going to do going forward? You can't go back 10 years, but you have this year. And so in 2020 is when I began the podcast. And I remember you saying that, and that stood out to me. Said, you know what, that's so true.
Yeah.
I don't have to go back and compete with the likes of Joe Rogan or Tim Ferriss or Rich Roll or others. I can start where I am, because there is a person who, before they listen to Tim Ferriss or Joe Rogan, they'll listen to me.
Yep.
So when did you get into podcasts? Not necessarily podcasting. When did you get into podcasts?
Yeah. So that quote is, the best time to start a podcast was 16 years ago, but the second best time is right now.
Yes, sir.
So I've been a podcast junkie since 2009. I've been listening to podcasts. I've been an avid listener, all kinds of topics from tech to politics to spirituality to comedy. And in 2013, I and my 5 close friends launched a podcast. We batch recorded. That means you record like 10 episodes in one day. And unfortunately, after launching our podcast, we pod faded. So the average podcaster stops podcasting after 10 episodes. So they consider you a new podcast within the first year, within the first 12 months of podcasting. And the majority of people who launch a podcast, they don't keep it going after 10 episodes. Not majority, but there are some who stop after 10 episodes. So I'm a former pod fader. I know what it's like to start a podcast, for it to not launch and pause and fade into obscurity. So having that background, moving forward, I've been a recording artist. I've recorded myself singing, doing different things. So I know the technical things. I know some things about production. And so in 2020, I made the decision that I would dedicate my resources and time to helping empower and encourage other podcasters.
Sure.
So I literally changed my Instagram handle to GP the podcast plug.
Mm.
I have lots of interest, Rich. I can do a lot of things, but I decided that I would dedicate my Instagram to inspiring and motivating podcasters. And I went on Clubhouse and I started sharing, co-moderating and moderating rooms about podcasting. And it has led me to connect with people from all over the world looking for information, inspiration, and just encouragement on their pod journey.
Yeah.
And so I've been doing that. I consider myself a pastor to podcasters.
Yes, sir.
And I've also launched a personal podcast for my church. I work at the Church of the Oranges. We've launched the Juice in the Orange podcast in the pandemic to help people share their story, because every person is just a name until you know their story. And so I believe that, whether you're a pastor, whether you have an organization, you can use podcasting to leverage and to build community and to reach a larger audience. I also have a personal podcast called the Sola Scriptura podcast. And I basically read a Bible verse a day. It's a short podcast, 1 to 2 minutes. And it's available on Alexa, Google Play, and Bixby. Okay. And I realized that, people don't really have those devices in their homes. Everyone doesn't have it. But in the next 5 to 10 years, the average household will have one of those devices. And so I'm positioning myself for my voice to be heard when they arrive. And so I don't mind starting something and not having a big audience, because at the end of the day, when I read that verse, it's more time with God. When I read that verse, it's me honing my voiceover skills. Yeah. And so it's not just for the audience, it's for me. And so I've used podcasting as a personal growth hacking tool for myself and for others. And so I think podcasting is amazing. And yes, there are lots of podcasts in the world, but the market is not oversaturated. It is still a considered new sector. There's still opportunities for voices to be heard, for your message to go forth. And so don't feel overwhelmed or intimidated by those with large followings. There's still room for you, for your voice, for your podcast. And they're projecting that within the next 12 months that the advertising industry for podcasting will be $1 billion industry. And so organizations are making the switch. Businesses are making the switch. Why not you? Why not your organization? So there's room for us all. And we don't do it for the income. We do it for the outcome. You shouldn't go into podcasting to make money. But I'll tell you what, if you're consistent and you have a message and you build an audience, you can make money. But that should not be your goal going into podcasting.
Speak to us about how to overcome the imposter syndrome, because there's a very real tendency to look at the download statistics, to look at the view counts. And before you even know it, you're comparing yourself to other people. You don't even look at their title. You look at how many times people view this, right? Oh, okay. So I do the living room podcast, but maybe I should pivot and start doing, how to organize your food pantry, because that seems like it gets a lot of views, right? And you're willing to sacrifice your message for what you think is communicated through views. Sometimes we wrestle with imposter syndrome. We're talking about podcasting, but I think the principle can be applied to other places as well. How can a person listening overcome that imposter syndrome that they might encounter when they finally launch into podcasting or whatever venture it is they want to get into?
Yeah, you want to make sure that when you do something like that, you clarify your why. Why do you want to podcast? Why do you want your voice to be heard? What message do you have? And after you clarify your why, you should clarify your audience, because if you're talking to everybody, you're talking to nobody. You want to clarify why you want to do it, clarify who you want to talk to, and clarify how you want to do it. Have a strategic plan. And so I think when you start, whether podcasting or something else, with this mindset, you kind of position yourself to keep going when the going gets tough. Because podcasting is not easy. It's hard work. It can be daunting. Sometimes you get tired of editing. Sometimes you get tired of scheduling interviews. Sometimes you get tired of scrambling for guests. Sometimes it can get tough. Sometimes you feel like you're not being heard, like no one's listening or no one's watching. But you know what? More important than the views, more important than the audience, you are developing and growing as you are doing this.
Mm.
And so not only are the listeners growing, Richard, you are growing as a person from this podcast. You are developing your interview skills. You are developing your listening skills. And there are some skills that you are honing and developing. You are already skilled, but there are some things that you will take away from podcasting that will position you for other opportunities in other sectors. And so, you should always show up as yourself. You should always be yourself, but be clear about why, be clear about who, and be clear about how. And so, how do you overcome imposter syndrome? I would say invest or find a community. So, I have a public speaking coach. I pay $30 a month to be a part of his community. And every month we do a deep dive about communication because I want to improve my skills. I have a, I call him a business slash mindset coach. I pay $70 a month to sit on Zoom for 1 hour with entrepreneurs all across the country to be inspired, to be poured into. And I also invest in a preaching coach. I'm in this thing called Seminary on Sundays with Bishop John Guns. And one Sunday a month where we're breaking down the art and science of hermeneutics and sermon preparation because I want to grow. Yes, I'm not perfect. Yes, I may not be the best, but I want to be as sharp as I can so that when I enter into these spaces, whether a pulpit, whether on Clubhouse, whether at a university, whether on a podcast, that I can do my best. And so don't worry about being perfect. Forget it. You're not going to be perfect. You will fumble over your words. You will mess up. You will forget to hit the mute button or unmute button. It will happen. But you know what? Action on fire is better than ideas on ice.
Whoa, yes, sir.
Stop waiting for perfection. Perfection is for God, not you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just get going and keep growing as you are going. That's the advice I have.
Your experiences have not only led to what you do now as a pastor of podcasters, as a podcaster yourself, as a minister of music, but by extension, your experiences have prepared you for other aspects of life. You are a husband of one wife. Isn't that what they always say when they
Yes,
introduce
sir.
us? Right? He's the
Yes, sir.
husband of one wife.
Let me do the pose. Let me do the pose.
Yeah. When you're sitting there and they're reading your introduction, you're just taking it in. We went to school together with the former Jackie Clemens.
Right.
And I remember when you all announced your engagement, I said, what?
Yeah.
And so shout out to Jackie, Mrs. Pierre. We appreciate you. Talk to us about that moment where you realized, hey, whoa, not only was the healing necessary for my professional life, but for my personal life. And not only did I move with conviction when it came to leaving seminary to go and do the Sing Off, when it came to moving from Florida to California, hey, man, you also have to move with a level of conviction when you get down on one knee and propose to a young lady, or before that, when you ask, their family, hey, listen, can I have your daughter's or your sister's hand in marriage? Was it the same sense of clarity by way of prayer that came to lead to this decision? How did you get to that moment where you said, hey, this is a big adult life-changing decision? How did you know you want to make that?
Yeah. So, I met Jackie, of course, freshman year. She was a freshman. I was a senior at Oakwood singing in the Aeolians. And, we were just high-by friends. But many years later, we would reconnect. And, throughout the course of our friendship and relationship, I sensed that confirmation that, okay, this is it. This is the direction you should go. I was in California. She was on the other side of the country. So we're dealing with different time zones and all that. But, I'm not going to lie. Just because you have confirmation doesn't mean you won't experience fear. Sometimes you wonder, okay, yeah, God, you want me to do this, but is this really where I should be? Is this really the one? You will have doubts sometimes.
Yeah.
However, if God confirms it, then I move forward in faith because faith is the substance of things hoped for.
Yes, sir.
Right. And so, I move forward in faith, and I love her with all my heart, and I believe that God has brought us together for such a time as this.
Yeah.
And I truly believe, like, if I would have dated her when I was at Oakwood, we probably wouldn't have been married because I
Mhm.
wasn't ready. I
Mhm.
wasn't ready. So I believe that God ordered our steps to build our relationship at the time that it happened,
Yeah.
and we didn't publicize it. But when we were ready, we publicized it. And I know a lot of folks were shocked, but it was a God thing,
Yeah.
and I love her with all my heart. And we've been married for 2 years now. And in just a few weeks, we'll be welcoming our beautiful baby girl.
Hey.
So, man, God is good. And I'm just grateful that sometimes you don't know
Mhm.
what you want, but God always provides what you need.
Yes, indeed.
If you would have asked me at Oakwood, are you gonna talk to Jack? Are you gonna marry Jack? Are you gonna holler at? I would have probably said no.
Mhm.
No, that's just Jackie.
Yeah. Hi, bye.
And if you would have asked her about me, oh no, that's just GP. Oh
Yeah.
no, he's not even that cute. Nah.
Yeah.
But I believe that the Lord preserved us for each other, and I'm grateful for His leading.
But I think it speaks again to what you shared with us already about preparation before exposure,
Right,
that you all were not permitted to see each other in that way. But that doesn't mean that those experiences being, I mean, you have a shared experience
right.
that was not informed by anything romantic. We were
Nope.
just part of a choir together. We traveled together,
Yeah.
and a lot of couples can't say that, but it was preparatory because you at
Yeah.
least had some seeds that would produce fruit. And here we are a few weeks away from you all welcoming your first child. What are your feelings on fatherhood / parenthood? What are your fears? What are you looking forward to? I know you aspire to inspire 1 billion people before you expire. This is probably one of the most significant persons that you're going
Yeah.
to have to inspire. What
Yeah.
are you thinking about as you approach that moment where you receive your baby girl into the world?
Yeah. Well, they say that you are never fully prepared for being a parent. But I'm grateful for the community that I have and the mentors that I have. I've been listening to podcasts, going through courses with my wife, and preparing as best we can. But I realize that I can only do so much. And
Yeah.
so I pray every day for my family, for my leadership, for my daughter, for her future. And it's scary sometimes. I'm just like, yo, am I ready? I
Mhm.
know, God, this is your plan, but am I really ready for this? But I truly believe that if God brings you to it, He'll bring you through it, right?
That's it.
So I'm excited about this journey. This transition is going to be life changing, and I'm excited about it. I'm grateful to be her father and to have my wife with me, and we're going to grow her in the fear of the Lord, and we're going to love on her,
Yeah.
and I'm going to do my best to be balanced
Mhm.
because I can get busy sometimes. And my wife has called me out like, yo, listen, sometimes you're here, but you're not here.
Mhm.
And so I've been intentional about being fully present. Like, talk about work life balance. There's no such thing as work life balance. You're either working or you're not.
Mhm.
So, GP, stop trying to do everything. Stop trying to watch TV and send emails. Stop trying to do this and that. Do one or the other.
Mm.
Because I realize when my daughter comes into the world, it will be important for me to give her my undivided attention. I don't want her to feel like my cell phone or my iPad or my camera or my computer is more important than her,
Yeah.
because I want her to feel loved, feel validated, so that she will know what true love feels like, and she won't be seeking for it in the wrong places or from the wrong people. So, I'm already thinking about those things. What can I do to be better, to be more active, to be more present as a husband and a father? Because a lot of times we get, just wrapped up in what we're doing, but we forget that the most important things are not things, but they're the people, the family, the people around you, the people that you love, the people who are right in front of you all day long. A lot of times we try to skip over them and reach everyone else, but we realize that our first calling is for our family.
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking about those things that I can do, whether it's scheduling, whether it's, saying no to this so that I can spend time with my wife. On Mondays, I put my phone on do not disturb and I
Yeah.
leave it there the whole day, because Saturdays and Sundays are like straight work days for me. I work, and on Sundays I'm like recording podcasts, and I'm co-hosting podcasts, doing editing. And so I have to dedicate that time for my family. And so
Mhm.
these are the things that I'm processing. You mentioned fears. One of my deepest fears is for my daughter to not be an Aeolian. So I'm going to make sure that she's ready.
Yes, indeed. Soon come Jason Max Ferdinand or whoever will be the director and conductor of the Aeolians when she's finally at that stage. My brother, thank you so much for the privilege of having this conversation.
Yes, sir. It's been an honor.
Likewise. And I know that you who have been listening and watching have received invaluable nuggets of wisdom that I'm sure you can apply to the spaces of your own life. GP, share with the people where they can follow you, connect with you, communicate with you, learn further from you.
Yeah. Well, you can connect with me on Clubhouse at the podcast plug. That's ThePodcastPlug, the podcast plug on Clubhouse, and on Instagram at GP the podcast plug. I'm also on Facebook, but I have no room. I have 5,000 friends. So if you add me there, you will be there in Facebook purgatory. So don't add me on Facebook. Holla at me on Instagram. There's plenty of room, and I'd love to grow and connect with you there.
Most definitely. Listen, friends, life is filled with switches and swift transitions, but know that there's inspiration along every pathway. It's preparation before exposure. And when you're finally exposed, you want to be as strong, as healed as possible for the purpose that you have been called to. That's all we have for this episode of The Living Room. I'm your host, Richard Martin. Our special guest has been Mr. Geston Pierre. Until our next episode, please continue to listen, continue to learn, and continue to live.